has been an awesome retrospective so far. I love these top threes. Great talk, great conversation. Now we're going to do my favorite part of my favorite episode, the retrospective, which has been our listener mail. So first of all, you all send us so much stuff. So thank you to all of the listeners. We can't obviously get to every single thing we get, but I've picked some good stuff, and y'all sent some great stuff. So for those of you who reach out and send us messages and emails and hit us up on social media, thank you so much. I'll start with a nice one. This is from Casey on Facebook. Hello everyone, my name's Casey. I've recently started watching the show for the first time. As a 21-year-old, it's interesting to see media from a society that is unknown to me. I've grown an appreciation for this show, for spawning the seed for later favorite shows of mine, Breaking Bad, etc. Your guys' show has been helpful for me. One, it gets me through my job, and as someone from the West Coast, having some of the cultural differences from here compared to Jersey. I can't think of a question besides how you guys feel about someone of the current generation finding the show and how that would affect their viewing in modern day eyes. Take care all, and good luck on the show. Hi Casey, thanks for writing in. So this is an interesting one, guys. I wanted to bring it up. It's like, let's try to imagine, now we all grew up kind of in this time where The Sopranos was actually current and on, and now we're doing a 20-year look back. What do you think people who are younger than us make of this show, and what must the experience be seeing The Sopranos as a time capsule for someone who wasn't alive when this was on?
So Casey, thanks for writing in. You were born when 9/11 happened. I guess that math just about works out. So you were already born into a post 9/11 America. Look, I'm not a scholar of history. I will say that life felt very different for everyone before that day, and it changed everything. And in a way I can't really convey in a way that will do it justice. I will say that the big shift you feel on the show, was in response to that, and all of the media you now consume, whether it is Breaking Bad or even something like a Game of Thrones or something like that, now exists in a much more cynical society, and things are much darker as a result. One of the reasons why I think the Sopranos is fascinating is because it turns on the wheel of a society that is changing as its protagonist is changing as well. So it is darkening in keeping with that society. I admire that you're watching the show now as a young person. I think that's really smart. I appreciate your resolve to do that, to kind of maybe get an idea of where your favorite shows have come from. For us who lived through it, it was something that was really amazing to behold at the time. That how art kind of responded to that. I don't know that I really have anything else to say. I think that's the thing that came to mind first. I love that you're reaching out with that question specifically. I think that's amazing.
It's a particularly fascinating and relevant question because the show is about this guy from 20th century America feeling like he's came in at the end of something. And we are in a new world. This is not the world we live in now, and people who are alive in our age bracket and older know what I'm talking about. We're in a different world than the one we were born in. Vastly different.
Economically, politically, everything.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
I think that, Casey, what you're experiencing with watching this show is actually something that I heard a lot about, particularly in the early days of the pandemic when people were kind of like stuck inside watching a lot of stuff, and The Sopranos experienced a resurgence then, indeed among a lot of young people. I think based on what you guys have been talking about here, young people might understand more than we do that the best is gone, because they didn't live, they hear stories, I think, about what the promise of the American dream was like, and they're not all cynical, but I think they are frustrated with good reason because of what they see. And that's one of the reasons, one among many, that The Sopranos does not drain. It doesn't wane in our consciousness. It's still here and seems to become more relevant.
Yeah.
On a completely different note, first off, I'm glad we're able to put the cultural difference in perspective. I can definitely connect with that because in my jobs I've been bi-coastal, and my friends out in California would ask questions like, I just saw a video of a rat carrying a piece of pizza. Is that real? It's like, yes, absolutely. That is 100% real. It's just things you don't necessarily
Some of the people in
think
this
about.
room have witnessed rat rape.
Oh, I did. Yeah, that's a whole other story. We can talk offline about it.
Jordan is completely flummoxed by that statement. No, you live in New York City. You see it all.
You see it all, and people too. But what I would wonder from someone of your age, that makes me feel old saying that. I'm sorry. Is, we have a completely different expectation of television quality these days. And I know I didn't watch The Sopranos live, but even back in, I think it was more like 2010, 2011 when I was watching it, the expectation still wasn't quite Sopranos. So, but now that you have your Mad Men's, Breaking Bad's, all of these, Game of Thrones, depending on who you ask, there are so strong expectations to television that Sopranos set. So I'm wondering if this feels almost normal to you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Write us back. Let us know how that all sits with you, because I can't even express how game-changing this show was, man. TV was not like what it is now. You didn't have all these awesome options. The stuff you see, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones, Casey, but like the stuff you would see on big-time, big-budget shows like that was inconceivable. And having a morally ambiguous protagonist, I mean, we talked about this when we covered college, but the fact that HBO was like, ooh, you can't have your main character murder somebody in cold blood. It's like, what show did they think they signed up for? That's how groundbreaking this show was, man. And so I'm glad that one of the cool, there are lots of things that I personally, as a 35-year-old guy, look at the younger generation and think, man, it sucks growing up now. One of the cool things about growing up now is that you just have so much access to cool stuff. So, that's something that's cool, and we can thank The Sopranos for, actually. So, Well, thanks for writing in, Casey. Appreciate it. Great question. This is from Catherine on Facebook. This is a very academic. This is a totally different thing she's throwing at us. This is more of a theory or just something. She says, hi from sunny England.
Oh, you're on it.
Hi from sunny England. I've been looking for some time for a Sopranos podcast. Listened to a few, but they weren't quite right. I love yours, though. I'm enjoying the insights, and I've almost caught up to date. Something I've thought for the last 20-odd years is that it's no coincidence that Livia is named Livia. I'd bet good money that David Chase knows his Roman history or has read Robert Graves' I, Claudius and Claudius the God. I'm convinced that Livia is based on Livia Augusta, Empress of Rome, wife of Augustus Caesar, mother of Emperor Tiberius, who exiled himself to Capri to get away from her. Tacitus spoke of her secret intrigues. She exiled her stepdaughter Julia and was reputed to have had a hand in her husband and stepchildren's deaths. She truly was the power behind the throne and was reputed to have had Germanicus, Postumus, Agrippa, Lucius Caesar, Gaius, and Lucius Claudius Marcellus killed in an effort to have her sons inherit the title emperor. I'd be interested to know what you think. Keep up the good work. All the best, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. If that theory isn't right, then it should be. I've always thought that was the basis for it. And if I'm sure Catherine does not need this note. If anybody in our audience has not watched the 1976 BBC miniseries of I, Claudius, they should. They had no money to do it, but they had some of the best actors in the world. Derek Jacobi, Patrick Stewart are in it. I'm forgetting the guy who plays the king, the emperor in it, but he's fucking awesome too. Brian Blessed, amazing acting. And yes, Livia is very Livia-esque in it. I think that theory rules.
I do too. I told her that that's awesome, and I asked her if we could use that on the show, and she was enthusiastic about it. But thank you, Catherine. That's freaking awesome. I'm glad I was able to read that, and if that wasn't in David Chase's mind, it sure is a hell of a coincidence. I think it's very cool.
Right over my head. Thank you all for taking care of that.
No worries. Stefano on Facebook writes, Ciao, Carmela E. Ciao, Carmela Stee. I'm not kidding. That's what he wrote. Thank you, Stefano. Appreciate you writing into the show.
I would like to respond to that.
Go ahead, please.
Ciao, Stefano E. Ciao, Stefano We.
Ooh.
Grazie mille.
We do get occasional weird things here that, I can't quite make heads or tails of, but... Carolina on Facebook. Hey guys, I'm from Uruguay. I wanted to let you know I can't get enough of this podcast. You're my company on the bus while I work, while I cook, and whenever I can.
Oh.
Thank you, Carolina. Or Uruguay. I can't believe the reach of this thing. The places we get emails from: Iran, Uruguay, the Netherlands. Crazy. This is wild, man.
Yeah. Staten Island.
Oh.
Whoa.
Hey.
The boonies.
We don't talk like that here.
All right.
Let's get to some of the emails we got here.
Go fuck yourselves now.
This is from Dave. I don't give last names unless they expressly ask me to. Hi, Chris, Lily, Paul, and Jordan. I caught up to you guys in real time this week, so feel like I can finally write you. Loving the podcast. I find your approach different than that of Michael and Steve on Talking Sopranos, which I listened to in its entirety. I like them both, but notably yours is more of an analysis. My wife thinks I'm nuts that I can listen to this stuff ad nauseum. She don't get it. You just released the episode Whoever Did This, a great episode which I realize now after hearing your recap is one of my faves. Only thing I want to share that I noticed about Ralph. As tough as he might appear, he doesn't once get physical with a male character. I think the only time he does get physical is when he beats Tracy. This is by design. I think this is by brilliant design of the writers, similar to Furio, who only gets physical once in Big Girls Don't Cry. Moving on to a couple slight criticisms. Well, let's take his Ralph thing first, and then we'll get back to the email to see what the negatives are. But yeah, that's pretty interesting that Ralphie, even when the one scene where I can think of where he has Jackie rough up a guy and kind of beats him up. Jackie, he has like, that's the only thing I can think of. But that is interesting that Ralph's violence is pretty much exclusively devoted to violence against women.
Sure. Well, yes, of course. Well, listen, we're going to talk a lot more about Ralph and his issues with women in the latter half of this episode because I'm looking at my notes and it's pretty inevitable. But look, Ralph he's a smaller guy and he's a little well coiffed and a little well dressed. I think he doesn't get dirty unless he really needs to. So I don't look at Ralph Cifaretto and say, yeah, this is a guy that goes out and beats up men when he has to. I think he definitely is a mastermind that sends thugs to make his collections and do his business. You can see that even in just the way he runs his guys like Vito and whoever else works for him. We know that he takes a special, I don't know if you want to call it a pleasure or whatever, he just has a thing against women. He needs to take revenge on them in some way.
Also, even with women, he has to sometimes reenact some kind of humiliation where they dominate him. So it's not it's not as simple as, oh, I'm going to go beat up this or that person.
Yeah.
There's paraphilia, there's all kinds of stuff happening with him. But no, I hadn't thought of it in those terms. It's a really interesting.
It's a good observation. Yeah, I like it a lot. I think that was the only thing I would think of is just like, I don't think he's the type that goes out and gets really rough with men when, if he doesn't have to. I'm sure he's been in many fights. I think all these guys have.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
All right, let's hear the criticisms.
Moving on to a couple slight criticisms. By the way, he says a couple slight criticisms, but the criticism section of the email is much fatter.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. So.
First, you guys blew it here. Fountains of Wayne was a real store in Wayne, New Jersey, and was the inspiration for the band of the same name.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, but the internet machine could have told you that. While I love Paul's typically deep analysis, can you do something about his mic? It is so quiet, at times I can barely hear him. Jordan.
Sorry!
You don't want Paul to get loud. Let me tell you that right now.
Listen.
See here.
Jordan. I love that you keep getting whipped on this.
Oh, boy.
Jordan, while I respect your opinion on Proshai Lavushka, you really need to look past the ancient CGI.
But that was last season.
Oh, my God.
They're still holding on to it.
He was
still whacking me on Proshai.
The writers needed to close the story on the airline tickets.
They did it poorly.
It really wasn't so bad. Sorry, needed to poke you on that.
I listen. I appreciate you wrote in. I'm sure you're very nice. You're fucking wrong. Okay. Bad CGI.
Let it go, Jordan.
I can't let it go.
Thinks so.
It looked bad.
This isn't a complaint, but a fan's take on some critical episodes. Season 3, Employee Toothpick University. My favorite sequence of episodes where Chase and Co. take major chances and really F with our emotions. First, in Employee, they make us experience the brutality, so we feel Melfi's pain and crave the same revenge. Mm-hmm. Then they take away what should so obviously be the conclusion. Brilliant. Yeah. Then in Toothpick, and even more so in University, they remind us, once we're getting comfortable with these gangsters, that they are cold and heartless murderers. It was like their response to the media complaining that the show was glamorizing the mob life.
Yeah.
It's very astute.
Very
Dave.
astute. Yeah.
That is, in fact, we were just having a conversation on a break about, this idea that depiction of something equals endorsement of it. And that's so clearly not the case. And I think they've done a great job, especially as of season 3, of reminding us that these guys are monsters.
Absolutely.
Anyway, folks, enough said. Thank you for keeping me company each day on my commute and allowing me to watch, once again, The Sopranos as if I'm seeing it for the first time. I think I'm buying my sister the DVDs for Christmas. And ciao, Dave.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Dave.
Dave is in Massachusetts. I'm glad we can keep you company, Dave. Thank you for the polite, constructive criticism.
I don't even take it that way because... if Dave were here, he would just be part of the conversation. Right. So nice job, Dave.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Dave. Paul, can you speak up a little?
Go fuck yourself, Dave. No, I'm kidding. Thanks, Dave.
There's a popular meme that goes around about the experience of listening to a podcast, and it shows the people on the podcast, and then it shows you, the listener, without a head. And I think that's what it feels like sometimes. Just like all the things you would love to say to us. So, Dave, thank you so much for sharing those. Yeah. And I agree with really everything you said.
Yep.
Except Prush Ilushka.
Now, see here.
I'm not going to let it go.
So,
now, see here.
The last thing I want to do, this next email comes from my brother-in-law, Brian, your brother, Lily.
Yeah.
And normally I would not indulge this person. But this guy is actually, though I bust his balls and he busts mine, he is a fan of our show. He listens religiously, gives me all kinds of feedback on the phone. But he took the time to write an email. And the reason I'm going to read this is because he's not the only one I got this from. He just took the most time articulating it. But I've heard from a few other people this complaint that we're going to have to address on the show, and I want to address it. So, gentlemen, here is my email about... I'm going to skip parts of this because he violates no spoiler policy.
You know what he violated? Including me, gentlemen.
That's also true.
How dare you?
Here's my email about why your thoughts you should be proud of and worked hard on are bad, and actually, and why you guys did a misogyny, tongue in cheek.
All right, do tell.
Yes, brother. Tell me how we did a misogyny.
The Soprano crime family is an objectively immoral and illegal operation, and the point of the FBI is to find the cracks within the law and exploit them for the benefit of society. And that is what they do here, and they are legally and morally right to do so. Adriana, despite being the weak link and a very feminine presenting petite woman who is physically ill at being exploited in this sense, is still guilty and complicit. She knows and acknowledges this while having agency over her participation. So it is immoral to defend her from the mean FBI who are trying to legally and ethically put an end to the Soprano organized crime family.
She has agency over her participation? Sounds like she's being browbeaten to me.
We're going to get there.
Brian, what is objective morality?
That's another... Hold on, I have to quickly just browse this next paragraph because he does violate our no spoilers policy.
Paul and I both have our knives out ready.
We're gonna answer this because I've heard from other people that we were too soft on Adriana and too hard on the FBI. So we're gonna address this.
I'm sorry, FBI.
Having watched the series to completion, we know Adriana may not be the brightest bulb on the tree, but she does have agency, and despite being a complicated character, a victim of abuse in an abusive relationship, she is still responsible for her actions. Abuse does not excuse criminal behavior. She cares more about a diamond bracelet than an ethical life, and she demonstrates this over and over, much like Carmela. Granted, Carmela may be worse because she's more acutely aware of how much she likes her lifestyle, Then he goes on to stuff I can't talk about because it's
Carmela's super happy
in future seasons. If it were Christopher in that interrogation room and the FBI exploited his addiction, would we be so quick to condemn the FBI? Granted, he's the direct criminal, Adriana's an accomplice, but still, this is the conclusion, he's wrapping up here. Regardless, Adriana demonstrates she not only has agency, but also knows there are consequences for her action. She just feels weak, and the audience assumes her weakness because she's feminine presenting, not because she isn't guilty. You could argue she's not as guilty as Chris because he's the criminal and she's the enabler, but she is still guilty. And how much is the audience's instinct to protect her a result of her feminine presentation? Checkmate, nerds. And that's Brian's thing. Is it a checkmate? What's our response to this, that we are too soft on Adriana and too hard on the feds?
Well, first, I just want to say I am a nerd. And I resent that.
One of my favorite nerds.
Thank you.
In reverse order. First of all, one of the reasons that we don't get the FBI trying to fuck with Christopher is because that wouldn't work. The FBI is doing this because Adriana is not only a woman, but one who is unsure of herself and one who takes cues from other people in terms of how to behave and what to do next. Checkmate, nerd. That's one.
Brian, if you're listening, you really got these guys spicy. I'm having the time of my life watching them.
Brian, love you. You're family to me because of your sister anyway. But you got to do way better than this. Weak sauce. Second.
Wow.
Yes, in terms of the first of all, your point on morality is a non sequitur because to me anyway, there is no objective morality. We have to make our own. So. Objectively terrible, objectively morally something. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry.
Next, the FBI. Again, yes, in terms of the books, perhaps we should be rooting for them.
No.
Rooting out these terrible criminals. Why is The Sopranos a different kind of show? Because it brings out different morally complex issues where we actually think, I don't know, these FBI guys kind of suck. It's one of the reasons it's fascinating.
Yeah.
What was the first thing he said? I don't even remember.
He said that...
I think he just called us dicks and that we're horrible people or
Oh,
something
well, that's
like
all
that.
true.
Yeah. That was all true.
Yeah.
The idea that people are softer on her because she's feminine presenting. But that's an interesting point you brought up, Paul, that the reason they're exploiting her is because she's perceived as weak and feminine as well.
Right.
And that's the reason their tactic is working. And that's why it feels predatory.
They also bust her on a cocaine charge, which is not objectively morally awful. I don't think drugs should be illegal. How do you like them apples?
That's an interesting point. Now, maybe people agree or disagree, but is that an objectively moral thing? It's illegal, but that's a fair question.
Yeah, Brian, my response is not as deep as Paul's, as is typical, but I will say that I think we can't remove this conversation from the context of the show. We do not like the FBI characters because there's nothing to like. The show gives us very, very little about them and their lives. They're mostly dorks, and sometimes they're harmful dorks. Let's say asshole territory, okay? They're just not likable. We're not on their side in the show.
Right, I agree.
So I have no reason to really root for them, even if they represent the laws of the society of which I am a part. The show's not called the FBI. The show's called The Sopranos. So I am always looking for the best from people like Ralph Soprano, or the best from Tony, or whoever. People who are objectively bad people and lawbreakers, yes, in our real world, but in the world of the show, we're asked to explore their rich emotional lives. And in exploring Adriana's, I find more sympathy for her and her wrongdoing than I have for the FBI just trying to do their job.
Well, and it also, hi brother, love you. I hope you're having fun with this. I mean that sounded snarky. It also assumes that with your objective morality that the FBI is always good because they're lawful, but I mean, look into Larry Nassar, Brian. They mess up a lot. They do a lot of very bad things too. And so I think to Paul's point, the complexity of the situation, right, allows us to, have complex feelings about it. Of course the Sopranos family are criminals. That's the point of the show. But we're rooting for them because structurally that's how the show is built, to Jordan's point. So just to summarize, I think it's a lot more fun to root for the team we're kind of designed to root for.
Yeah, I will say, as to the point of whether did we do a misogyny or not. Of course, obviously Adriana is a very attractive woman. She's a very feminine presenting character. Brian, that's all valid. I think that the show presents this character in a way that is weak. I don't think that's something that we, the hosts of this podcast, put on Adriana. I think that's in the script. And I think the FBI is made to look predatory by going after a weak character. I don't think her weakness is necessarily tied to her femininity, but I think that, yes, I agree that there is an association that is there that maybe should not be, though I'm not as quick to label the host of this podcast as the guilty party there.
I also would argue that, okay, so let's play a game. Adriana just breaks up with Christopher. Where does she just get to live back with her mom again? Will her life be okay? Can she just leave? Is Adriana really full agency over herself and her body at this point, or is she in too deep?
Yeah, I think she's trapped either way.
Right? I mean, that's what I think. So at this point, yes, she made a decision at one point in her life to associate with these people, just like Carmela did. But that doesn't mean that they are always going to be proud of that decision or always thrilled that they made it. Carmela is not happy by the things she has because she is not loved the way she wants to be loved. So she made a decision in her early 20s, right, when they got married, and we're supposed to continue to blame her because it's not what she thought she wanted when she was in her early 20s. What are any of us doing in our early 20s? Are we still doing the same thing? I've left and changed. I think a lot of us have.
I'm 39 and I'm still doing stupid shit.
Right, but are you are you on the exact same track as you were when you were 21, 22?
No. I am still a nerd.
Yeah.
Yes.
A proud one with my fellow nerds, but...
Sure.
All right, well, there it is, Brian. That's round 2.
Love you, Brian.
I know you, and I know you'll be back with more of this. This is not concluded if I know my brother-in-law.
At least he didn't tell me I was wrong on Proshai Lavushka.
Not yet.
But
subject line of his next email.
That's round 2, Brian. We'll see you for round 3. I hope you had fun with that.
We'll see you again in the
Love
post-BoJack world.
Yeah. This next email, I want to say before I read this next email, this person wrote in on our last retrospective, and I am officially in love with this person.
Is this Alan?
This is Alan.
Alan! What's up, buddy?
Cheerio.
The subject is flattered, and I'm going to read this in my Alan accent. Hello, chaps. First of all, thank you for giving such attention to my letter from last season in your Season 3 retrospective. I felt flattered about how much credence you gave to my feedback, and I really enjoyed your responses. Laughed out loud at some of them. Meanwhile, I like the fresh enthusiasm you three seem to have brought to this new season. I actively look forward to fresh episodes dropping now. Just a couple of points so far with Season 4. And we can address these points one at a time if we want, based on what it is. Alright. In Episode 2, Jordan raised a really salient point about the notion of friendship in relation to Adriana and the FBI agent. He cogitated on how genuinely sad he felt for her upon discovering that this person she presumed was her friend turned out to be anything but. Don't get me wrong, I love all the analytical stuff, but a podcast comes alive when emotions are engendered now and again. It speaks to us... I love this guy. It speaks to us about the nature of any friendship. Is it one of convenience, mutual benefit? Will it run its course, or is it one of the handful of true, lasting friendships that will endure? He referred to Westworld and how in that show they reduce humans to a simple set of motivations. I appreciated the fact that Jordan was moved at Adriana's plight, but amused at his antipathy towards the feds. They're simply doing their job on behalf of a society that maintains an ambivalent attitude to organized crime.
Our listeners love the feds.
Let's
start
We all rats?
We got a bunch of narcs
Let's
over
start
here.
the Feds podcast. It's the Sopranos podcast, but we only cover the FBI scenes.
However, this led me to suspect a possible David Chase cosmic joke here, seeing as A key component of the show is Melfi analyzing this mob boss and in her own way reducing him to his basic components, drives, and issues.
Very good, yes.
The feds manipulate Adriana with ease as part of their goal to convict. What is Melfi's goal? Little more than 300 big ones per hour and some extra cachet at dinner parties, as far as I can see. Did we buy that? I don't know, Alan. Is she just in this for the 300 a month?
No, I don't think
A
so.
session?
I don't think so. I don't know that Alan means that seriously. I don't think.
Yeah.
Alan, I don't think you mean that you think Melfi's just in this for the money. I think these are all astute observations. Similar to Brian's email that we just read, yes, we understand that the feds are just doing their job, but the show depicts them in such a way where there's really no sympathy for them. I keep hearing listeners, not just you, Alan, and not just Brian. Our friend David, friend of the podcast, David, also did this, where he talked about saying, these characters are all objectively bad people. We should be condemning their behavior, and we should be kind of on the side of something that brings this to justice. That them all going to jail and this organization being dismantled would be the ultimate good ending for this show. I just don't read that when I'm watching the show. I'm never watching the show thinking, boy, I hope they get them this week. I think that's like a weird way to look at the show.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There are so many shows
that
like
as
that.
well.
There's so many shows like that. You want to watch the cops get the bad guys? Watch Law and Order. It happens every single week.
Yeah.
That's not what this show is.
I'm sure I should be cheering for the DEA to catch Heisenberg.
Right.
In Breaking Bad.
Right.
But as long as they don't, one of the best shows ever keeps on stringing.
Yeah.
And the complication with this, even though I think Brian and Alan are both onto something, yes, we should be wanting a society where the law enforcement can root this out. What do you do if we're identified with the criminals and the law enforcement either doesn't give us very much to identify with, or some of the things they give us to identify with are more unpleasant than the career criminals?
Right.
Which is deliberately done, I think.
At minimum on the show, we would need more FBI characters, or at least one or two that we were really interested in, and we knew more about them, and we saw the stakes, the personal, emotional stakes for them. Alan, you led your email by saying that you think the podcast becomes basically more interesting when real emotions are involved. It's very hard to have real emotions about the FBI agents on the show and about their cause because it is so robotic. And the stakes just seem to be to accomplish their mission, which they don't seem to have really many personal feelings about, at least so far. I'm not the series expert here. I don't know if we get any big FBI characters that become really a huge part of the series, but it seems like the series is always going to center the gangsters. And so those are the people that I'm going to have empathy for. I just don't really care so much about the plight of the FBI.
Yeah, they're just doing their jobs is tough for me too, because they're just doing their jobs by any means necessary. So at what point is just doing your job crossing a line too? If Adriana is a criminal, arrest her. If Adriana is attached to this family and she is a danger to society, they should arrest her, right? So by using her like that, right? And I understand that this is how investigations work and all of that. That I'm not trying to say that, it's perfect. I'm just saying it's more complicated than they're just doing their job. I think if you're just doing your job, find evidence that Christopher has done something and convict him for it. I don't know that getting Adriana involved is the right thing to do to just do your job. So I just think that the conversation's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, Alan, just to the Westworld point, I think something I brought up there was just... I think I was actually trying to get to something deeper about the show, which is just to say that, underneath all the complications of emotion, it seems like everybody can just be kind of reduced down to their simple drives, their simplest motivations. And, in terms of what Melfi has figured out about Tony, I don't think she's fully cracked the code there yet. And I think what motivates her is not the $300 an hour. I think she still hasn't solved what this man is about. In a way that he can use to improve his life in any way, and in a way that will mutually satisfy her. I think she has skin in that game, and I have to believe, even though I don't know for sure, because I don't really know what's coming next, that there will be a more satisfying conclusion to that relationship, or at least a next step that moves us beyond just the simple fact of Tony wasn't loved by his mother, and now he is violent and depressed. Right? There has to be more.
The sin for her is not greed. I think it might be pride.
Agreed.
She still thinks she can help him.
Yeah.
Right.
She might be wrong.
Yeah, well, and I also think she sees how the people around her would just abandon him, and I think she thinks he deserves some help, and if no one else is going to do it, I have to do it. You know, if she sends him to a behaviorist, will he end up just getting thrown to the wayside and forgotten about so she can control the situation? She thinks she can get somewhere. She may be wrong, and that's where the pride comes in. But I agree, I don't think it's the money that motivates her. Yeah.
Alan continues. In episode 4, Jordan raised the notion of reversing the Ginny Sacks situation and imagining if it was Tony's wife that was the butt of weight jokes. This was interesting because you all had concurred that Tony and Carmela's relationship is far more of a contractual one than a romantic one. Indeed, Carmela appears to be way more in the know than any of the other wives or girlfriends. In this, she is reminiscent of Livia. Crucially, though, she is less needy and darkly manipulative than Tony's mother. Instead, Tony, consciously or not, taps into that facet with his choices of mistresses. As Melfi points out, Carmela's the best choice you've ever made. This is the best. Meanwhile, I congratulate you all for creating an interesting discussion out of the car crash that is Christopher. I've only endured that episode once, and goodness, it was a slog.
Yeah.
Your conclusions as to the small-mindedness of much of these Pride events and how they often only trigger more strife, I totally concur with you on. Those are my thoughts so far. I hope they are encouraging in some way. Regards, Alan. P.S. I may be in danger of becoming a Jordan fanboy at this rate.
Oh,
Hell
no.
yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Wow. Alan, you know what? I'm an Alan fanboy. I was the most excited to get to your letter today when Chris said we had one.
We are Alan fanboys, and I gotta tell you what, Alan, keep writing in, and we will always read your emails and letters on the show, because your vocabulary is terrific, and you're hilarious, and we love having you listen.
And God save the king, Alan. We love you.
And good insights. To Alan's points, Tony seeks out mistresses that seem most similar to his mother in some way, right? So that is true. I don't know that Carmela is Livia-like. I don't see that.
I think he meant in the way she knows things.
Oh, yes.
She's involved.
You're right. I'm sorry. Yes, I agree there.
Yeah.
But
I don't think he was comparing her to
I understand.
Livia.
Okay.
Just
but the whole Gloria, Irina, Valentina, they're all Livia-esque.
Yeah.
Right.
Crucially, in his marriage, it seems like he went the other way.
Right.
correct.
So it's like it's Carmela almost can never be enough because he still needs the approval of his mother. She's no longer around, so he seeks out these surrogates, dark-haired women, deeply troubled,
and we see
hard to satisfy.
We see what it's brought to pass at the end of season 4. So.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, this is going to be the last one. This is from Tommy. I think he wrote us just a quick compliment, and then I think he shared a poem that he wrote because it has his name on it with a copyright thing. You guys are totally amazing. I have tried them all. You are the best.
Oh, thanks, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Your insight and analysis are both top drawer. Thank you, Tom. I'll read your poem that you sent, and you're written as the author here, so I'll take you for this, and we'll let everyone decide what they think of it. The Eternally Single Sopranos Fan by Tom. We both sat silently, observing the early spring snow. It's a sign of the end of the world, just like the Twin Towers, she declared. Seeing my chance, I pounced. I know. Quasimodo predicted all this. Grinning, I turned my head. Nothing. Her mouth remained motionless, her eyes unwavering on every flake, an empty and dreaded silence. I slowly made my way upstairs, the bedroom, to pack. Just one bag, overnight. I had never fully committed.
Tommy, that was solidly unsentimental.
Thank you, Tom, for sending that. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Tommy.
Yeah, and that's going to do it for viewer mail. Thank you all. We love this stuff. Please keep reaching out. Social media, we're at The Sopranos Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, at Sopranos Podcast on Twitter, TheSopranosPodcast@gmail.com. Keep the mail coming. This is one of my favorite segments. I love this. I love how riled up we get.
And obviously more people wrote in, but if we didn't get to yours, that doesn't mean we didn't read it or that we didn't care about it. It's just, we love hearing from you, so please continue to write.
At this point, we have a pretty sizable audience. I mean, we could do a whole show about it. Maybe at the end, if we have leftover emails or stuff, messages that we've gotten, we can, when we do like a series retrospective, we can do a big long one. But let's see. Let's get back to our retrospective here with a top three.
Top three! Oh my goodness, top three!
Rip a hole in the sun!
I don't think that's a good idea.
Oh my god.
This is a big one, boys and girls.
Uh-oh.
Top 3 characters / performances.
Impossible.
I know, right?
Impossible list.
Even I have honorable mentions for this
Yes. Easy number 1, I think, but an impossible list.
Who wants to start? Lily, you haven't started one
Yeah,
yet.
Lily,
have
one.
you?
All right. Well, my honorable mentions are Artie Bucco.
Yes.
Interesting.
And Christopher. Normally he's in my list, but I can't right now. So my number 3 is Andrea De Matteo, Adriana.
Ooh, interesting.
Very nice.
I have a feeling we all have the same number 1, but let's see how this shakes out. I have one honorable mention this season, and you may say it's silly, but fuck you. It brings me a lot of joy, this performance, this character. Val Basolio as Murph in season 4 is my honorable mention.
Wow. No one saw that.
This character is hilarious to me. I love his voice. I love the way Junior interacts with him. It's hilarious. My number 3 is Vince Curatola as Johnny Sack.
Yeah. Nice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I have 2 honorable mentions. The first is Artie Bucco.
Yeah.
To echo Lily, I think Everybody Hurts is a great episode, and I think he's a wonderful actor that just earns his keep every season.
Yep.
Maximizes his minutes.
Yes. Yep. Terrific. My other honorable mention is Christopher. Yep, Lily again. He's got a great presence in this season because of the nature of his addiction and how he plays the role. It isn't as forward as maybe it could have been. A different show might have centered it differently. But it's a great performance. My number 3 is also Johnny Sack.
Okay, very cool. I like that with the same number 3.
Honorable mention. Dre De Matteo is Adriana. Number 3, Michael Imperioli, Christopher Moltisanti.
Nice. My number 2 is Ralph Cifaretto.
My number 2 is Joe Pantoliano as Ralph Cifaretto.
My number 2 is Ralph Cifaretto.
My number 2 is Ralph Cifaretto.
Wow. Should we say our number 1 again?
Do this. I mean,
1, 2, 3.
Carmela Soprano.
Soprano.
Okay, so we
Girl,
all the
this
same
is your
2.
season, baby.
We all the same 2 and the same 1.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about our number 3s because I think we were like some were. Did you have Chris as well for your number?
He was an honorable mention. I have Adriana.
You have Adriana. You have Chris Paul.
and I had Adriana as my honorable mention.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about Chris and Adriana,
Johnny Sack is our
and then
number
we
3.
have Johnny Sack shared. Let's talk about Chris and Adriana as far as their performance and characters go. I mean, what can be said about these performances? Chris did an amazing. Michael Imperioli did a hell of a job, obviously, and
Always does.
Dre De Matteo's importance is radically stepped up this season.
Yeah, they stepped up her writing, and then
Yep.
she stepped up to it.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, no, she's perfection in this season. I think Adriana's perfection forever, but the way Drea De Matteo handles this role, she's another one. Edie Falco, I noticed the acting because she's just monumental. It's easy to kind of separate and appreciate both. But similarly to James Gandolfini as Tony, I never think of Drea De Matteo. I only ever see Adriana. She is so perfect and authentic in the world, and everything is believable. She earns every line. She gets it, and she's just so seamless. It's effortless watching her. I just think she's the bee's knees.
She is the bee's knees.
She is. Our number 3, and I was wrestling with this one because Christopher, I say every season, is one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite non-Tony character. But he never makes my top 3, and I had a hard time. But you know what? Vince Curatola is perfect in this role. And he had a particularly compelling season here.
And this is not a Michael Imperioli versus Vince Curatola conversation. They're both amazing.
You only have 3 choices, and there's so many great
for me, Johnny Sack is just he is one of the engines that just keeps this season running.
Yeah.
Whether it is the deep offense he takes on behalf of his wife from the comment from Ralph, ordering the hit on Ralph, then suddenly trying to negotiate this deal gone bad between Carmine and Tony, and then crowning the season with a move to maybe become the boss of one of the 5 families of New York. Incredibly important performance, but also just a really good, very dynamic performance from a character who's really smart and can be really manipulative, but also very likable. So it really a great performance.
Yeah, I agree fully, man. And he has gravitas. He really feels like this. Like, if I had to pick 2 people who are, some of the 3 people, if I had to pick the top 3 most believable actual gangsters on the show, it would be James Gandolfini, Tony Sirico as Paulie, and Vince Curatola as Johnny Sack. Like, I can see this guy as a high-level mob operator and buy it.
Yeah.
You look at him and he's got the eyes. And this season was particularly fascinating because we got to see different sides of him. Watching him beat up Donnie K and piss on him.
Yeah.
Seeing this character's berserk button pushed.
Yeah.
Was a fascinating thing to watch. And then watching his relationship with Tony as he navigates this trouble with Carmine. Just great stuff. We really get to see his power. We feel his power in the previous seasons because he's such a dynamic actor and the writing is good. Mm-hmm. But we really get to see his power and why he is where he is.
It's also the parallel of he's a character to me who's very similar to Tony in where he is in his career, right? In his operation, he's the one that is smart and sees all the sides of a thing and probably knows how it could be fixed. But unlike Tony, Johnny Sack's hands are tied. He can't go over Carmine's head.
Right.
He's beholden to the family and that duty. He wants what Tony has. He wants to be unfettered. He wishes he had Carmine where Jr. is, right? Basically dealing with a trial, very ill, locked off in a house somewhere, not really the boss, just a lightning rod, right? He doesn't have that. He kind of knows the way to fix everything, but he doesn't have the means to do it. He's begging for Tony to finally give him the power that he feels he deserves, and the New York family might be better off because of it.
Yeah, well said. Let's talk about our collective number 2, because this is the last time we're going to get to talk about him.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste.
Ralph Cifaretto, what a mark he's left on the show. Yeah, he's such a unique character. Joe Pantoliano brings such an interesting quality to this guy.
He's a fucking demon.
Yeah.
A demon from hell.
Yeah. He's cute, he's well coiffed, but he's dangerous and he's demented and he's evil. And it's fascinating. It's great. He's a crazy.
And they made you kind of feel sorry for him, and then they killed him off.
Yes.
Which is, he would have been my number 1 based on that last episode, were it not for the last episode of the season, which Carmela then grabs us by the scruff of the neck and, does her thing. But yeah, it was an incredible season for him, even though he doesn't make it past episode 9. He had a few fun moments early on. They play him for a lot of laughs early on in this season. That might be deliberate too. He's still funny later on, but it gets more dangerous. It gets more because all the stuff with Valentina, even though that's got a fun element to it, it gets serious. Joey Pants, I've said it before, he's been in a lot of cool stuff that I love, including The Goonies, one of my favorite movies. This is his career best work.
Yeah. And the fact that we can stomach a second of him on screen at any point after what he does to Tracy speaks to Joe Pantoliano's charisma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That we can somehow compartmentalize that and enjoy moments with him when he is funny. And that's what makes Ralph listen, you hear all the time about these real life serial killers and sociopaths who will charm the fucking pants off you and then brutally murder somebody. It's just crazy.
Yeah, to date, he's, in my viewing experience, the most vile creature to come out of David Chase's mind. He's worse than Richie Aprile.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you've all said very eloquently, it's been amazing to watch this actor work through this character and to give this character a life that we can even have sympathy for by the time we get to whoever did this. I do not know what the darkness is in Ralphie's past specifically, but it is also interesting in that it gives us a window into how we can look at these guys. We've kind of been trained, right? We're trying to look at Tony and try to figure out, well, what happened to this guy that makes him the way he is? We don't get therapy scenes with Ralph Cifaretto, but I wonder what those would look like.
God.
Would we even be able to stomach it?
Right.
You know?
Rough. But the fact that they leave it ambiguous but give you just enough, that's so
it's
juicy.
almost
And
worse.
That's such disciplined writing, too. 'Cause
Yeah.
It would be so easy for a writer to just overshare and slip it into a cliche. And sometimes it's like the old thing where, the monster's more scary before you see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so having something in his past that has blackened his soul, and we kind of have an idea, but have to just imagine how bad it was for this guy to be the product. Oof. Great stuff. Great character. David Chase really did something special here, as did Joey Pants.
Right. Well, it's also an exercise in how dark will your brain go, not having those answers.
Yeah.
Can you even fathom what happened? Where does your brain go thinking about it?
Right.
And that's pretty amazing, too. It's pretty impactful.
It is.
I gotta go. That moment when he just gets up, when Tony even mentions his mother, tries to delve, just puts down his bowl full of olives and just steps out. That moment is really, for something so underplayed, very telling.
Oh, yeah.
It's great. Great shit. Thank you, Joe Pantoliano, for this scintillating performance. This is not a criticism of the show. It sucks that you're no longer on the show, though, because your presence was massive, and you are missed.
Pour one out for
show.
Tony's best earner.
That's right. Yep. And the collective number one. All I have to say about this before I pass it on is every season we give the disclaimer before our top characters and performances that we don't include James Gandolfini as Tony because that's sort of the given and he would be the number one every year. This is the first year that might be challenged. Tony's number one spot. He's always a dynamic performer. The show owes so much to him. He's on every minute. He's right there every time, every episode. But Edie's performance this season is so special, so monumental. This character deserves this number one spot, and I think might have taken several of our number one spots, if not all, even if we were including Tony. Tremendous, earth-shaking work.
She's a queen. She's a goddess. Edie Falco. That's it.
All right, and on it goes. Let's talk a little bit about, before we get into the next top three, an important arc for the season. We talked a little bit in our character breakdown, but let's just flesh this out for where we are and where we're going. The Chris and Adriana progression this season. Chris, of course, rock bottom. We really, he's always had a drug problem, a temper problem, a discipline problem, but it all spiraled this season. We find him clean and sober in the finale, but it was rough getting there, and he instituted his worst moments of abuse on Adriana that we've seen yet, and it got real ugly, and not knowing where this is all going, it looked like Chris might not have made it out of this season alive at several points. So thoughts on that, and thoughts on Adriana's journey. Her world was rocked in the season 4 episode 2 no show when she became an informant for the feds, and this is clearly something the show is going to drag out longer. How do we feel? Too long? Working well? What's working? How do we feel about everybody's journey in the Chris and Adriana corner of the world?
Well, at the risk of doing a misogyny, I think Adriana is played as a victim in this season.
Yeah.
I think the actor does a great job of doing that. I don't think she has much agency this season because the one play she tries to make to save herself, which is to accelerate a marriage between her and Chris, is completely blown up in her face. She really is trapped, being literally pulled apart by the FBI on one side and her obligations to the family on the other. Both these things could both these things could result in ruin for her. And while she's being made to endure that, the person that she's trying to protect, the person she loves, is literally beating her. It's hard to watch someone go through this. I think she has a similar kind of an arc to Carmela this season, where it's just like, how much can you take before you pop? At least for the time being this season, it is made somewhat better by Chris going to rehab and promising to change. I hope that sticks. But it really goes to a really horrible place before it gets to that. Yeah. I'm concerned for her future.
Yeah.
Yes, that's well said. It does strike me that Adriana and Chris both find themselves in sort of a different kind of hell.
Yeah.
One being addiction, the other one being pulled back and forth. But yeah, Chris is also exacting this abuse on her. And she doesn't know where to turn. As the last beat, it's a small beat with her. I think it's one of the only times I see her in Whitecaps is with the FBI agent, and she's, again, pulled in between. So we just see it threading out. We don't know exactly where it's going. It doesn't make me feel good. But no, I dig it. I like a lot of the stuff with them in this season. I'm intrigued to go on the journey next season with our audience.
The reason why the objective morality doesn't work for me, or at least I struggle with any of it, because it would be so easy for me to hate Christopher. Just truly hate him, especially this season, especially watching how he hits her. And I don't hate him, and I legitimately can't tell you why, but I'm somehow still rooting for him, and I know that he's an addict, but he also, is still needs to be held accountable for his actions, and yet, I'm still rooting for him. I still love him, and I don't understand it. But I do, and so that's what's amazing about this show, right? It really makes you question where you're coming from and where your allegiances lie, and why is it that?
That's such an interesting thing you said. I like that, because we struggle, as people who put out content, especially analyzing a show, sometimes a moment happens and you feel a certain way, and we try to dig deep to find out why and what's behind it, but sometimes it's okay to say, I like this character and I can't understand why, but I do. That's okay. I think that's fair, and I feel similarly about Chris. He's a terrible person. He's not someone I would be friends with in real life. He does shitty things to Adriana. He's a criminal. He's not particularly bright. And he's not someone I would collaborate with creatively based on what I've seen of his screenwriting abilities. So,
Just taps on his shoes.
The roof is soft tar. But yeah, so this is a hell of a journey. No spoilers here. I would say that season 5 is shaping up to be a big one for Chris and Adriana, because
it would have to be.
Yeah, just based on where we leave off with them, there's so much dangling. And the big question for Chris is, can he maintain his sobriety and lead this family into the future? Question for Adriana is, what future even is there for anybody involved in this? And is there any way out that doesn't involve absolute catastrophic destruction? We'll see. But what an interesting journey. I think it's time for another top 3!
Top 3.
Oh, I liked that little top 3 thing. That was cool. Thank you. Top 3 moments.
The hardest category.
This is absolutely the hardest category. Moments are such.
It's like, what constitutes a moment? Oh, Lord.
What constitutes a fidget?
That was pretty decisive, so, I don't know.
My runner-up, I'll start. My runner-up moment, and I'm sure this might be on at least somebody's list here, is Christopher's intervention.
Yes, it's on my list.
Yeah,
yes.
that's
of course. Yeah. That's my runner-up.
That's a runner-up?
My number 3 is, we've talked about it, so we don't have to delve when it gets around to it, but Dean Martin, live at the Sands. It makes me so happy.
That's your number 3?
That's my number 3. Dean Martin, live at the Sands.
All right. I have 6 honorable mentions that I'm cutting down in this moment down to just my 2 honorable mentions, and I'll go number 3. My first honorable mention is Ralphie's prank call in Whoever Did This,
God.
which comes from, of course, Officer Mike Hunt of the Pennsylvania...
Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania.
Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, yes, absolutely.
It's a mistake.
Yes. He's all right, man, but I'm afraid he's in a little bit of trouble. We found him in the men's room in Lafayette Park. I don't know how to put this delicately. He was sucking a Cub Scout's dick.
What? That's a mistake.
No, ma'am, I wish it was, but we had to have emergency surgery performed upon arrival at headquarters after discovering a small rodent in the rectal passage.
Oh my God.
A gerbil, ma'am. The county does not cover procedures deemed cause sexual activity. Section 4, paragraph 15. We'll need insurance number.
Oh, Maron, I have Blue Cross Blue Shield.
I'm on the other line with the insurance company. Can you hold?
Oh, God.
That's honorable mention 1 for me. Honorable mention 2, I'm cutting this down, is in No Show, season 4, episode 2. Meadow, in a fight with her parents about what she's doing about her college situation, refers to her dad as Mr. Mob Boss. Something she's never done to his face like that.
That's a great moment.
And it awakens in Tony something that we don't usually see in him in his house with his family, which is what I refer to as his dark other. Oh, you wanted Mr. Mob Boss? Here he is. You summoned him. Yeah. And I think she didn't quite realize what she was about to do, and then that other Tony shows up, and you're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
You know, a really cool moment.
Very cool moment.
My number 3 moment is the intervention scene in The Strong Silent Type, because how could it not be?
Sure.
Yeah. I got a few quick honorable mentions. The no-show scene that Jordan just eloquently framed out. The end of Pie Oh My, Tony and Pie, just the tableau.
Yep.
Everybody Hurts, the Tony and Gloria Dream. And Eloise, I just call this Melville dinner, where they're talking about whether or not Billy Budd is gay. And number 3, Christopher's intervention, Strong Silent Type.
Yep, there you
go. My number 3 is Carmela brings AJ to Furio's house.
Oh, that's great.
Why am I always having to come here?
Tells Meadow, it was a real pain in the ass.
Dude, meeting's over.
That's great. My number 2, pretty simple. Tony kills Ralphie.
My number 2, the Phantom of the Dark Lady on the Stairs. Final dream sequence, calling all cars.
Chris can read my number 2.
Whoever did this, just yeah.
Tony kills Ralphie.
Yep.
My number 2 is the intervention.
Awesome.
My number 1 moment is the Tony and Carmela scene in Whitecaps by the pool that goes into the home theater room. That's the whole thing coming out and unraveling and manifesting itself.
That is also my number
1. My number 1 is Tony kills Ralph Cifaretto. Whoever did this.
My number 1 is the boat in Whitecaps. Dean Martin at the
Great.
Sands.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
I love
A lot of
that.
overlapping this category.
We've talked a lot about Dean Martin at the Sands. So let's give a little time here to a couple moments that stood out. One, of course, I think we got to talk about the actual murder of Ralph is something worth talking about. And I think we talked a lot in our Whitecaps episode about the importance of the scenes between Carmela and Tony, so we may not need to double down a ton on that. But yeah, let's talk about this stuff. And then someone else had a different one.
I had the Dark Lady on the Stairs, the dream sequence. We did talk about that a bit already because we covered dream sequences as one of our topics.
Yeah.
So I'll just very briefly say it's a point of fascination for me, and it is the reason to bring Dr. Melfi back to the show. And I really hope it happens because this is the thing that is at the core of Tony. It's eating away at him. It's like in the horror movie where the demon attaches to the person and not to the house. Right? Tony is haunted by this forever. And unless he gets a strategy to deal with it, it will eat him alive. Whether it kills him or puts him in jail or destroys everything around him, unless he walks up the stairs and confronts the spirit of his mother in a way that he can actualize, he's finished. I hope Melfi comes back to give him the tools to do that. And I think that dream sequence is fucking terrifying. And it feels very dreamlike to me. Yeah. Not in a way of just like, hey, cool, look at all this symbolism and stuff. It felt like a dream I would have. It feels like I'm here and I'm me, but I'm not. I'm speaking in a voice that's unfamiliar to myself. I don't know where I am, and am I in the right spot? And oh God, what's that thing on the stairs? I'm terrified of it, but I want to get closer. And as I do, I wake up and there are no answers for me. It just stops.
Yeah.
This is the maze that Tony is now walking in with no guidance. This is what we hope is illuminated in season 5 or in the future.
This is the first time I'm going to do this. I'm amending my list. I'm officially swapping Dean Martin Live at the Sands into my honorable mention and Chris's intervention in episode 3. I must have been distracted when I was writing this top 3. It's just, let's talk about the intervention and then we'll talk about the Ralph murder.
Sure.
The intervention is just one of the funniest scenes on the show. It might be the
maybe
funniest
ever.
Scene. So it has to be in the top 3, and it is for all of us, right?
Yes.
Assuming my amended list. It's just great. All of these personalities on display in one room. The fucking guy they have running it, the Stu Leonard pork loin guy.
Who thought this would work?
I think just him. Yeah, he thought it would work for a minute. And...
I know it's like organized crime, but these aren't like organized people.
Yeah.
You know, like this isn't something that they're going to like. They're not articulate. They're not feelings sharers. None of this is going to go well, and we get to watch. And aren't we lucky?
It's so fun. It also brings like a little taste of therapy to everybody in the most chaotic way.
Yeah, you get a little bit of we get Tony with Melfi. You get a little glimpse of like how somebody like Silvio in therapy.
Right.
You're
good luck.
Disgusting.
Tony seeming to try to keep it on track once the little shit box, the dog comes up, he's useless.
Oh yeah,
because he's sentimentalized.
How could you not see it there on the chair?
Right.
Yeah, it's a great sequence. It's really funny. As Lily says, one of the serious things about it is it points out these guys, even if they really could get past themselves at some level and they want to help each other, they can't.
Yeah,
they're all too fucked.
Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely. Before we get into Ralphie, unless we're not done with you.
You're weak. You're out of control, and you become an embarrassment to yourself and everybody else.
Whoa! Well, we said non-judgmental.
Fuck that. Let him take his medicine. It's just so good. And so...
Before we get into Ralph, I wanted to mention Carmela bringing AJ, because I don't think that was on anybody else's list.
Yeah.
I love that moment, especially the first time. I know she keeps bringing him, but it's so self-aware. It's so just real of like, if I go there without him, something's going to happen.
Right.
Nothing will happen if AJ is there.
Yeah.
And I love that self-awareness, and I just find it amusing. But I also find it very smart. It's a good move on Carmela, but it's also a really good foil to she's being so careful about her feelings, and then you've got Tony he knows she left the fingernail and they don't locate it before they leave the hotel room.
Right.
She's being so careful and he just doesn't give a shit. And so it's this really great moment that brings me a lot of joy, but also thought. And I love Carmela and Edie Falco.
There's a great Edie Falco moment in one of those visits with AJ. It makes me laugh every time. She brings AJ there, and this is one of the quick ones. It's not like later on in the season she goes for extended periods of time. Yeah. But this one is one of the early ones, and she just goes to knock on Furio's front door and tell him something about the garage. And Furio invites her in after a couple lines of dialogue, and she just looks at AJ like, "Ooh, we're being invited in," and AJ just looks miserable. It cracks me up. She's like, "Oh, yeah, we'll go in," and AJ's like, "What the fuck? I want to go home."
So good.
It's
poor kid.
Great pick, Lily. Those moments are great. Just quickly, I don't want to double back too much, but we did talk a lot about this scene in our Whitecaps episode, but. This scene with Tony and Carmela that Paul and I had on our list by the pool and then in the theater. I mean, what can you say about that? It speaks for itself. It's just
the acting, the writing. Another great thing that they do that The Sopranos often does is one of the most important things in the scene is not emphasized, which is that Tony embodies Livia.
Yeah.
When he says, "He talked to you, huh? Oh, poor you." Nobody lingers on that. Carmela comes back in and says what she needs to say, which is, "He made me feel like I mattered."
Yeah.
But the audience has been trained to note these things. I think the audience, even in it not being emphasized, will say, "Oh, lovely."
Yeah.
And that will guide them going forward. I love that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the championship belt for Edie Falco in that scene.
Yeah.
Right?
You fucking hypocrite. Great. Just great. And I mean, it's also great because there is so much lying and bullshit on the show. This is the most real either of them get with each other at any point. It's explosive and painful and hard to watch, but very good.
In less capable hands, a scene like that could become very stage actory, but it instead feels very real.
Yeah. Yep. And then let's talk about this murder of Ralphie. So in a season that is the least violent overall season, meaning no real major character deaths, there is a website that I've seen that tracks every murder on the show ever, and this season has the least. But oof, this Ralph Cifaretto murder, just the way the whole scene plays out. To put it in the middle of an episode that they make you feel for Ralphie the way they do with the scene with his son, and the wonderful emotional acting by Joe Pantoliano, the visits to Father Phil, and just this tough thing that he's dealing with here. And then you have this barn. I love the mystery. We had strong opinions on whether or not he actually burned it down. But I just love that that's ambiguous and never truly, actually, officially answered. And the accusations hurl. The argument they have before is tremendous. The way Tony's just subtly poking the eggs. I love that moment when Ralphie's stirring the eggs and then realizes what's being implied and just kind of stops. That lightning bolt, that fire was a bolt from beyond. It was always something, and what are you talking about? She bounced back, and then, it gets personal. Don't give me that look. It was a fucking horse. What are you, a vegetarian? You eat beef and sausage by the fucking carload.
Boom!
Punch! And they have this amazing natural, so many fights in TV shows are like, this is not a criticism of the kung fu genre, but like, it looks, so many TV fights are like Jackie Chan style fights where everything is clean and you block it. This is two guys fighting and scrapping for their fucking lives, grabbing everything they can. It's dirty. That kitchen gets trashed. There's raid in the eyes. There's knives. There's broken glass. There's choking. It's fucking great. And then, of course, the whole aftermath. Any thoughts on this before we move on? It's just such a monumentally important scene, and it's done so well.
And the thrusting into the change of format in the episode is so fascinating, too.
Yeah.
It's just such a unique... I mean, we'll get into our top episodes. Spoiler alert, this is on mine. But it's just such a unique episode. And, that fight choreographer deserves a lot of praise, money, whatever.
There's not much to add by my lights. What you guys said, that's why I love that scene. Among other things, though, as the way it turns into a bottling episode, Tony gets the call that Pyomai has died. He's in bed with Valentina, and seemingly it's like early morning. He goes there, then goes to Ralph's house, and they're making breakfast. It's like, what? So let's say it's like 9 a.m. So Tony beats Ralphie to death in his kitchen at like 9 o'clock in the morning. So they have to wait all day in this dead guy's house and prep his body, then sit and eat peanut butter out of a jar while Chris comes down off of his heroin high to wait for dark. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That episode, whoever did this, has those three events that seemingly happen maybe by chance, right? We have Junior gets hit in the head with the microphone and goes down the stairs. That leads to him spiraling out into the early onset dementia. We get Justin is hit by the arrow that is fired up in the air and comes down, hits him, also like a bolt from the blue. Puts him in the hospital. It's going to give him speech delays, all kinds of things, maybe worse, we don't know. And then also the stables catch fire. It, of course, is likely that Ralph set that fire, but it's at least presented initially as such that this is something that could have been electrical, right? It could have happened, though the way that Tony is eyeing the stable, it really seems like it was probably arson. And then we have this confrontation between the two of them that, Ralph actually mentions bolt from the blue or whatever he says. It's like a chance encounter. And I think this encounter is charged with that energy of random action. Ralph did not wake up that morning expecting to die. Tony did not go to his apartment expecting to kill him. And it's the spontaneity of the fight that really makes it such a dynamic scene. If Tony was going to be there to go kill Ralph, this is not how the fight would have started. There's something in the words there that just makes Tony realize, I'm going to hit him. And then at some point in the fight, this becomes like, this is more than just a physical fight. One of us will die.
Yeah.
And to watch that all happen in real time, being charged up by all this kind of random chaos energy going into this fight, is just, I think, the best fight I've ever seen on television, because I feel like the outcome could be just as chaotic as the things that got us here. The precipitous nature of the narrative up to that point has just been wild and erratic. I don't think that Tony came there, with the intent of killing Ralph. He certainly has his mind made up already that Ralph set the fire. I don't know that Ralph did. It seems to not matter, actually. But I don't know... I don't know what Ralph could have said that would have put Tony off of this.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting fight. The actual fight choreography is beautiful. It's just an incredibly ugly fight.
Yeah.
It's so nasty, and the way Ralph's body is disposed of is incredibly nasty as well. That's very gruesome. It's unforgettable.
Yeah.
And even more unforgettable, it's episode 9.
Yeah.
It's the middle of episode 9, and you're like, what? You're just as caught off guard as probably Ralph was while he was stirring those eggs.
Yeah. Well said. All right, so we're almost getting to the end of our retrospective here. We're going to do our final top 3 in a few minutes. I just wanted to touch on a couple last quick things here just to close out our analysis of the whole season. We have one thing I want to talk about just because, and we don't have to go too deep on this because we did bring him up earlier as an honorable mention, but Artie Bucco had a standout season, and John Ventimiglia continues to add more to this show every time we see him. And I just love that any of these actors you give an episode to, they really step up. And he's been there throughout the whole season, but his performance in Everybody Hurts is really special. And I'm sad to see Tony and Artie in this state, especially because Artie is alienated from Charmaine as well. What a season for Artie Bucco.
Yeah, well, and also that episode, Everybody Hurts, in which he's just so foolishly kind of tossed around. It becomes kind of a grim portent of Tony's future once he's on the outs with Carmela. How he's now he's the one who may look like a fool, though of course he's asked for it. Perhaps Artie did as well. John Ventimiglia is a terrific actor, and I appreciate that episode can be so miserable and so funny at the same time.
Yeah.
Really terrific.
Yeah, and he didn't have a whole lot where he was emphasized, but that episode, talk about maximizing your minutes.
Yep.
He made it happen.
That scene of him hyping up in the mirror, just watch that on repeat. So great job, John Ventimiglia. Thank you. And then the last subject before our final top 3, let's just touch down on the Soprano kids in a meaningful way and their journey for this season, because a lot happened for them low key, considering they weren't the A storyline of the season. First of all, Meadow had a crazy start with No Show. That episode where she was grieving Jackie Jr. and having all of the, kind of regressing and not registering for her classes on time and laying around the pool and going to parties, and was frustrating Tony and Carmela. Then she wanted to go to Europe, and they have this big fight. We talked about the scene earlier in one of the moments.
Mr. Mob Boss, right?
And then we lose her for a few episodes, and when we come back, she's really grown up. It's something like that was kind of like a catalyst for... Yeah, let's talk about it.
Some eagle-eyed Sopranos viewers actually looked at the title of the episode No-Show and noted that a no-show is also when a passenger does not appear with their ticket for a flight that they're scheduled to depart on.
Smart.
They're also referred to as no-shows. So for all Meadows talk about going to Europe and seeing Dr. Kobler, who advises her to go as well, she doesn't show up for that flight. She doesn't go to Europe. She goes back to school instead, and good for her. Meadow makes tremendous strides this season, and she's associating herself with a better class of people. But of course, that's something that only pushes her out further from her mother. And of course, this comes home in Eloise, where they're unable to continue a mother-daughter tradition because there's a rift that is growing between them. That rift is largely composed of, Meadow becoming more independent and Carmela hating her own dependence. So there's that going on there.
Yeah.
And AJ, also in Everybody Hurts, he's got a low-key season in a lot of ways. But actually... Everybody Hurts is his companion to the 4th episode of the series,
Meadowlands, yeah.
Where that was when he discovered that his dad was a mob boss, but maybe it's kind of cool. and here he discovers his dad is Penny Ant.
Yeah.
And not that big a deal.
Yeah, AJ has discovered where...
It's incredibly sad. It's easy to laugh at AJ because he says buffoonish things, and he's a bit of a doofus, and Tony rags on him and grabs him for unwelcome kisses, and has to teach him what gutters are, and all, he's easy to laugh at in that sense, and he is also, like any kid, he has his annoying moments. But like you mentioned earlier that you're watching the season differently when it comes to Janice, watching the series differently this go around, I feel just dreadful for AJ.
Yeah, I agree.
What a sad, low-key season he has, because that's really what he comes to figure out is like, not only are his friend, a lot of the people in his life probably only interested in him because of who his dad is, but who his dad is isn't even really all that special in the scheme of the world, and that's tough.
And yet, despite that, in Whitecaps, AJ is seeking out his father's affection and hoping to have a relationship that is salvaged there, as if to say, look, regardless of what's happening with you and Mom, can I move in here? Can I live with you? She's always on my case. This happens a lot in divorce. He's taking his father's part, almost to try to patch things up as best he can, and saying like, well, you two are getting divorced, but listen, our relationship still matters, right? I matter. He wants to hear he matters. He wants to hear that maybe you two will get back together, right? That's a possibility. He has the naivete going on. It's I of course feel horrible for Carmela in this, but I feel at times equally bad for AJ, who does not have the emotional wherewithal that Meadow has to be able to navigate this really difficult situation at the end of the season in particular. I'm also looking at Devin Pillsbury and saying, AJ, I don't know, what is the future for you? What are you looking for in a girl? Are you just with Devin because she's very pretty and you're just all sexed up right now because you're a horny teenage kid?
That's the thing. Is like,
she's not someone that's good for you. She's exploiting you for who you are as well. She likes you because you're the gangster's son. I don't think there's much else going on for you.
And I know it's, whatever. It's new and exciting for him, especially growing up kind of a chubby, quiet kid. He's doing all that studying, wink, wink. And it's probably, but that will lose its appeal in time. So what is AJ looking for, and what does his future look like? And it gets sad because I don't know that I have good answers for him.
Yeah. Meadow has made a better match with Finn, but again, that's someone who takes her farther from the family. Right. This is her trying to get out. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it is difficult to have a relationship with Carmela if everyone in your life that you associate with is someone that makes her feel like an outsider.
It's very interesting watching Meadow relate to her family now that she's fully entrenched in the Ivy League culture.
Right.
That having them over for dinner in her New York apartment, you really realize how much she's grown in the last 2 years in some ways. But she still has to kind of contend with this. It's just fascinating TV. It's why it's so good. But a quieter year for the kids perhaps than some of the previous, especially the previous one.
We were focusing on the marriage this time.
Yeah, exactly. So, AJ's old enough to have a life of his own, even if it's a sad life, and Meadow is off on her own as well. So it was just interesting, but very good. I think it's time for a final top three.
Top three.
Top three. Jumping off the roof, rip a hole in the side. Sorry.
Oh, Paul. Alan, please write something excoriating about Paul. Please, I want to hear that.
Please, old chap.
Who wants to start episodes? Top 3 episodes.
Why don't you start, Chris?
Oh, Chris, you want to start? Go.
Sure, I'll start. My number 3 episode is watching too much television.
Honorable mention, watching too much television. My number 3 is The Strong Silent Type.
Honorable mention, watching too much television. Number 3, Eloise.
Number 3, Everybody Hurts.
My number 2, Whoever Did This.
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 You want us to do our number 1 at the same time again, guys?
1, 2, 3.
Whitecaps!
Yay! All right, so we all have the same 2 and 1. That makes things easy.
Kabam.
Let's just go over just one by one with our number 3s, and then we'll hit the final 2 and close this fucker out. Watching too much television. This is a runner-up for you as well, Jordan.
It was.
And
someone
Jordan
also
distinguished himself when we spoke about it.
Oh, shucks. Well, thank you. This episode was really meaningful for me. It's not a favorite in the series for most fans.
Right.
But I thought we had one of our best discussions ever on the podcast
too,
about
actually,
it.
yeah.
Yes, I did get very heated during this because it was something that was sort of beyond the characters on the show, but yet
Yeah.
the characters were deeply entrenched in it. This is how our system has rotted out from the inside, and how our characters are actually in part responsible for the corrosion that goes on, and ultimately the injustice is done to us, to the citizens, to the people. I just thought it was a really great episode that for once really looked at the system rather than the individual characters existing within it. And to some of our fan mail, to some of those points, watching too much television is a great episode to hold up when you want to try to create a sense of objective morality. Of course, that's sort of impossible, but that is an episode where you could say, look at all the damage that's being done, and no one is really trying to fix it. And actually, I will lay the blame at everyone's feet, probably including the federal government. Just a really interesting episode from that perspective, and with some characters who are largely not major players in the season, like Zellman and who are the other? Maurice, thank you.
Yeah. I agree. It was on my list too for that reason. I'm fascinated by the mob stuff and the scams. Now, I don't need it. I can be sustained by all of the great emotional family stuff. I'm not one of the hits and tits guys. But as a guy who's just generally fascinated both with politics and with the mob and how it works and how they make their money and how they leech off society, this is a great episode for all the reasons you said, Jordan. It's just such a stark illustration. And to use this continuing metaphor of a rotted out, a hollowed out, a husked house is just great, especially when you see where the season goes.
Yeah.
Tony, he's reaping what he's sown in his own way, and this is part of it, but it does lay out, and this is another reason why season 4 is a little bit more, difficult. There's no Davy Scatino in the HUD scam.
Yeah.
Davy Scatino is a pathetic, pitiful character that you empathize with, and his family certainly gets caught in the crossfire. But Davy Scatino made bad decisions that got him there. These people who live in this neighborhood in Newark are just not going to have any chance of good housing in that neighborhood because these guys are ripping off the system, because the system is complicit, because the FBI is harassing a nightclub owner instead of arresting Assemblyman Zellman, and because this money just gets diverted and defrauded. It's fascinating. I enjoyed it. It's a classic for me.
Yeah. Eloise.
Eloise
is just an insane episode. It's a rager, even though it's quiet. I know the big scene in some ways is the one at the plaza, but the scene for me is the one at dinner when Carmela can't let it go. She doesn't know what she's talking about with respect to that book. Doesn't stop her. It's not about the book either. It's about how she can't she's saying none of this exists, and we know precisely what does exist because of what she's hiding about Furio. I love all that.
Yeah.
The ending is such a great payoff. Yeah, it's a big one for me.
Understandably, it's great, and that dinner scene is it's dynamite.
Yeah.
Yeah, Everybody Hurts just stuck with me. The Artie storyline is really beautiful to me, and sad, and seeing him get to that point is just heartbreaking, but I also just love Artie. The parts of finding out about Gloria, all of it just.
Well, in this idea, we talked about this when we covered this episode, but it's really I love how you opened it up, Jordan, and your initial reaction was the show has a fascinating way of expressing, isn't it shocking that Tony somehow in his brain, before this glorious suicide thing, actually thought of himself as a good guy.
Yeah, crazy.
And he's wrestling with this, holy shit, what the fuck am I, a toxic person? And it's watching him realize this and wrestle with this and try to fight against what is staring everybody right in the face. It's fascinating TV.
Yeah.
It's a great pick, Lil. Absolutely.
The strong silent type. This is an episode, of course, the thing to speak to always is the big centerpiece in this episode is the intervention, and it's an amazing scene. But actually, every individual beat in this episode works really, really well for me. It's everyone kind of buzzing about Ralphie's sudden disappearance and what could have happened to him, and the suspicion is kind of already on Tony in a way. We have, Tony's tearful reaction to what happened to Pyomai in therapy. This is also a very funny episode where Paulie has the painting of Tony and Pyomai redressed to look like it's a kind of a fat Napoleon. This is where Furio gives the gift of the balsamic vinegar. This is, of course, where poor Cosette is killed. It starts off the episode really, and then of course the brilliant intervention. This is of course the episode where Tony sleeps with Svetlana, which is like the most improbable plot point, and then immediately swings back around to precipitate the chaos of Whitecaps.
Right.
Wonderful, wonderfully said. And of course, whoever did this, we've talked a lot about this already because the Ralph murder is the centerpiece of this. But if anyone has any threads they want to tie up on whoever did this,
the form that the episode takes.
The structure is so special. Its placement in the season is special. The events that happen in it is special. And it's unforgettable. Never forget that episode if you've seen it.
Great bottle. I also just love Tony alone at the end of the episode going through the Bing from the back entrance and seeing the mirror and
that faded, that out of focus picture of Tracy
it's just it's a haunting shot.
Unforgettable.
It really
visually.
is. Yep. Yeah. And then of course Whitecaps. The big one. We've really investigated it well today.
It speaks for itself.
Yeah.
You just watch it and you know, this is the best in the series and the season and possibly the best in the series.
It also is such a perfect finale in that it does really end everything.
Yeah.
There's plenty of intrigue to go on, but I think you said this either on our previous recording or in another episode in this retrospective, but the show could end here. It would just be a really bizarre, sad ending. But it's the end of their marriage. It is a fix for New York for at least the time being. Everything is just kind of stalled in this really unfortunate place.
Yeah, it might be the perfect place to say to your audience, go to your room for a year and think about this.
Right.
And think about what you've done.
But yeah, beyond a masterclass in acting, it's the symbolism of what that house represents and how it is also unattainable is terrific.
Well, and with that, we've done all our top threes. There's one more thing I just want to mention before I close us out. We didn't talk a ton about him, but I also want to give credit where it's due. Federico Castelluccio. We don't know if he'll be back. We don't know what this portends. It was a very mysterious and sudden end. But if this is the last we see of Furio, what a job well done and an excellent performance. His presence on the show was huge. He did a great job this season.
Absolutely.
He was so threatening and believable as Tony's heavy, his driver, his go get shit done guy. And so Federico Castelluccio, it's been great. Thank you for your service on this awesome show, and your performance is excellent. You're always around the Jersey area, so you're someone that I hope to bump into and just tell in person how special your work was. But well done, and you have great chemistry with Edie Falco, and there's another show there that we never got to see that I would watch.
Hell yeah.
The Juntas. Living in growing olives somewhere in Naples. But thank you, Federico Castelluccio, and thank you to all of our audience, our listeners.
Thanks, guys,
for writing in and for listening to us and supporting us. Please continue to keep supporting our show, listening to our show.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. 4 seasons, you've all been amazing.
Yeah, holy shit. I mean, this has already gotten so much bigger. I'm fucking really pumped for season 5. Season 5 was my favorite for a long time. It has been bumped off that spot as I think about it and see the whole series in its grand totality, but season 5 is a fucking doozy, man. And there is one particular episode in 5 that I think is going to be one of our best podcast episodes yet. I can't wait to get into it. And thank you all, and thank you, my lovely co-hosts. I'm Chris D'Amato.
I'm Lily D'Amato.
I'm Paul Mancini.
And I'm Jordan Hugh.
And we will see you soon for season 5, the first episode of which is 2 Tonys. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful time.
Checkmate, nerds.